Thank you for joining, everybody, and a very warm welcome to my session around Authentication 2023. What logging in will look like 5 years from now. To be honest with you, I don't know, but I can give you some ideas probably. So, okay. So first of all, a few words about myself, because I believe that you have to introduce yourself and get yourself known to the public before actually start speaking to them. So my name is Marcin Majchrzak. So I'm the regional sales manager for Europe at Crossmatch Technologies since almost 2 years now. So I'm 35 years of age. I'm a dual national, Polish and British. I've spent half of my life in the UK and half of my life in Poland. I currently live in Poland since about 3 years. And to make the matter more complicated, I cover mostly Germany and Western Europe, being based in Poland, but actually officially working from the UK. So this is my story. I've got over 10 years experience within the IT security market, within various sales roles. So as I told you before, I worked for Crossmatch since 2 years. Before that, I worked for Intel Security for a couple of years, and then for 4.5 years, maybe more, I used to work for Avecto, who's also present and have a stand just right next to me. So one caveat here, so I'm a tech-savvy technology user and not a technical person. So I raise my hands up and say I'm not going to pretend that I'm deeply technical, just like most of you guys are in the room. So you have to give me a bit of leeway. Okay, so without further ado, I'll just quickly introduce Crossmatch, who we actually are. So has any of you heard of Crossmatch at all, whatsoever? You have, okay, thank you. You can collect a pen later on from my stand. So you probably haven't heard of us as a company, but I'm guessing you come across us as a company somewhere. So Crossmatch, the legacy business of Crossmatch, is actually a biometrics market, biometric solutions. So talking here about fingerprint readers, scanners, palm scanners. So we work very heavily with border control, with local authorities, with the police force, and I would say we've got pretty hefty chunk of the biometrics market worldwide. So if you go to probably most of the European airports, definitely Schiphol Airport because I've checked it. Go to passport control, and they always have those palm scanners. Most of them are from Crossmatch. So if you are using an iPhone and you're using Touch ID, that's a solution that's been developed by the old Crossmatch team and later on sold to Apple. If you have a fingerprint reader or sensor in your Dell or HP laptop, then this OEM software that runs on every single of them worldwide comes from Crossmatch as well. So this is our legacy business, but I'm actually not representing this part of the business, but the second one, which is the software part. So software part is all around multi-factor authentication, or as we call it, composite authentication, and why I'll tell you guys in just a minute. Okay, so what we do as a business, as you've probably seen on the previous slide, we help organizations get rid of passwords. And why? Well, quite simply, according to the Verizon data breach report, 81% of data breaches are a direct result of either weak or compromised password credentials. So over 70% of employees reuse password at work. I mean, I'm no different, to be honest with you, because there's so many of them to remember. You just, either you have a very strong algorithm in your head that you can, remember different passwords for different websites, or you just reuse the same ones. Or you just basically grade them by, okay, this is an important website, this is not, and I've got different kind of level of passwords for every single one of them. But again, I mean, who does that? And it is despite of 91% of people reusing, password is poor practice. I'm one of them. 59% reuse the same passwords for work and home use. And why we do it? Because it's easy, because it's convenient. And ease and convenience drives adoption. So adoption in the sense of poor practices, poor behaviors goes up. if it's convenient to do so. So this is why people do it. And we believe that password days are numbered, so you probably heard of some of them. I think in 2016, Uber concealed a massive hack where they actually paid the hackers, I think around $100,000 not to disclose the fact that they've been hacked, stealing 57 million users and drivers and about 600,000 driving license data. Another one was a file that was found by a company, 4IQ, on the dark web. They found about, I think, 41 gigabytes of password usernames and passwords in clear text, which were up for sale, by the way. And then same 2012, you can probably remember seeing those emails from LinkedIn. You have to change your password immediately because we've been hacked. Well, they didn't say it this way, but there might be a privacy or a security concern. So we advise you to change the password. But basically, we've been hacked. Bloody hell. Change it now. So, and again, those credentials were up for sale in a dark web as well. So as you can see, I mean, the trend kind of repeats itself, and you know exactly where this is coming from. Passwords are weak, passwords are being compromised, and there's something that needs to be done about it. So even the big ones like Facebook, Microsoft, and Google say, well, we want to replace passwords with something that is more effective, that is easier to use, that's user-friendly, that's going to have a high adoption rate. So Facebook, for instance, wants to come up with a service where if you forget a password for a third-party application, you can actually use Facebook as the authentication mechanism. How? Well, basically, you get to recognize your friends from the photos you have, or recognize some patterns that are familiar with you, and this way you can prove that you are actually you are the person that you say you are, and can either recover the password for a third-party website, or basically log in without further problems. So Microsoft has been saying that passwords are bad for a while now, but only recently, I think in 2015, they've introduced Windows Hello, where instead of a password, you can log into your system using your face, using your fingerprint, or some of the factors. And I think this is the way they are going now. Another example is Google. They want to kill the password by actually using behavioral biometrics, and not only the factors you have, because obviously you always carry your phone, but they want to check how do you use your phone. Okay, so what is the voice pattern that you have? What is the gait, as in how you actually walk with your phone? Is it typical how you hold the phone? Do you hold it like this? Do you hold it like this? And is this your typical behavior? On that basis, they want to provide a continuous authentication, where they basically say, and we say the same thing, authentication, it's not only about you log in, given the right credentials, and you are logged in. It's about checking, okay, is the person that's actually logged in still using that system, or is it actually somebody else that came in their place and actually abusing it? So this is where we're going. So what's the kind of market trend? Well, Accenture Digital made a survey. I think surveyed about 24,000 end users, asking if there were any alternatives to passwords, would you be considered to using them? And then 77% say yes, they would be interested in actually knowing what the alternatives are. 60% believe, well, passwords are difficult and it's a cumbersome. 59% say the next 12 months I am interested in using a uniquely encoded chip on my phone or device to protect my security. What it means, I mean, you can either use a TPM chip, or you can just use the chip in an iPhone device, whatever. But again, that's one of the alternatives. 58% say, so almost 60%, in the next 12 months, I am interested in using biometrics, face recognition, voice, retina, to protect my security over the internet. Now, bear in mind, this is a survey done in 2015, and since 2015, things have actually moved on. What's actually quite worrying is that almost half of the people are not aware of the fact that there is an alternative, that you can actually log in using different mechanisms than just a username and password. So what's the kind of solution? Where's the market going currently? So in 2017, so we had a turning point where Apple has introduced Face ID as an authentication mechanism. Obviously, they used fingerprints. I think it's since iPhone 5 or 5S, which again had a pretty slow adoption rate because it was quite new. People, preferred to use pins, use passwords. They were not used to it. But then again, as times moved on, more and more people got convinced that this is actually a good idea. So, as I said, 2017 was a big turning point for biometrics. So we've seen adoption increase across multiple industries like mobile, airports, healthcare, entertainment. But there is one dynamic, this advanced customer awareness and comfort with biometric technologies in everyday life. So major technology leaders like Apple, Samsung are incorporating biometrics into their devices. So even, we see more and more customers like McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut are all using biometrics to track their employees for time and attendance to prevent fraud. So this is definitely a major, major leap forward. So Apple's introduction to Face ID with the iPhone X made headlines because Tim Cook announced that the new features, the aim of Face ID is to actually replace passwords and other biometrics like fingerprint altogether in the future devices. And this is where, Apple was a big contributor towards driving that market trend to actually use biometrics. So now you see, major bank providers enabling biometrics to, confirm your banking applications, to confirm your transactions, to log into your bank. If banks allow it, then, well, it's deemed to be quite secure. Obviously, there were some challenges in the start where it was very easy to spoof fingerprints. Well, not very easy, but there were ways to do it. Now the solutions got more and more sophisticated. So it's actually pretty secure. Well, definitely more secure than a password, I would say. So biometrics, what does it actually mean? So biometrics are kind of split into two things. So on one hand, you've got your inherited and natural traits. So basically your fingerprints, how they look like. You've got your retina. That doesn't change as well. You've got your voice. Plus your behavioral characteristics. Obviously, behavioral characteristics, they do not change. Well, they do change over time as opposed to inherited characteristics which stay with you for, well, most of your life, really. Behavioral characteristics is, as I said before, your gait, how you walk, how you behave, what are your habits, etc., how you talk, how you type, how you move your mouse, and use many of the devices. So you can use actually that data to provide authentication. So what are the factors, as I mentioned to you before? So face recognition, as I said to you before, with the iPhone X, the user acceptance rate got really, really skyrocketed when it comes to using face recognition. Previously, there was the same situation with the fingerprint. So Apple, although they weren't the first ones to introduce face recognition, because many other companies did it, but they are being seen as the trendsetter. So that's why many people followed. The same thing was with fingerprints. Iris and retina scan, iris scans are proving to be commercially more viable than retina scans. I think in 2013, FBI did a pilot where the car started doing iris instead of retina scans, although it had some privacy concerns. Voice recognition, I bank with a few UK banks, and actually voice recognition is used for authentication into your banking telephone system. You don't have to give your PINs. It's enough to actually speak to the phone. On that basis, you can be authenticated. And obviously behavioral, which we talked about before. So the biometrics, what does it actually promise? Well, first of all, proof of presence. You only have 10 fingers and 2 eyes, and you cannot borrow it to somebody else. So a situation why, for example, McDonald's have introduced fingerprint login on all of their tills is to prevent fraud. They had many situations in the past where basically people were using each other's smart cards. Before, when you were using a PIN, let's say somebody got late to work for an hour, he had a friend and called him up and said, well, can you actually log into the till for me because I'm going to be late, but I still don't want to lose the money. Still want the time to be clocking. So in order to prevent that, they introduced biometrics as the login-in mechanisms to the till. Same Burger King, Pizza Hut, those guys have joined as well. Another reason why to use biometrics is convenience. It's a factor that you always have with you, whether it's your fingerprint, whether it's your face, whether it's your voice. I mean, it's not a case that you leave it at home and forget about it. So you can always use it as a factor. User choice is another one. I mean, you give the users the freedom what they want to use. If you want to use the face, the fingerprints, if they want to rely on behavioral biometrics, for instance, or retina. So there's many different factors that you could choose from. And obviously innovations as biometric devices are getting better and better and more sophisticated, it's actually much harder to spoof them, and it's very easy to get a high user acceptance. So, do many of you know what is the difference between identification and verification? So identification is a scenario when you have one too many match. So you set the question as in, who are you? Which means that as soon as you scan your fingerprint or your retina, the system is able to capture that and compare it with the database of the image or actually the cryptographic key that's in the database and say, okay, this is Marcin based on the fingerprint we've been given. And this has got a pretty interesting use case. So we've been working with, the company is with the US Army in Iraq. So what the guys used to do, what the soldiers used to do, they used to carry a portable enrollment device. So every time they visited a village in Afghanistan, they took fingerprints from everybody and enrolled them into a database saying, okay, this is such and such, that's his name, he lives here, and this is his biometric image. And why they did it, you probably heard many times, so it's quite common that every now and again, soldiers go on the road and they either find or get found by an IED, so improvised explosives device on the side of the road. So what US Army used to do is to collect fingerprints from the remains of the IEDs or from the IEDs itself and then actually compare it to the database of the fingerprints they've enrolled to check, okay, are those villagers actually genuine people who live there, or do they support Al-Qaeda and the terrorist attacks? So this was the use case. Verification is a one-to-one match. Basically, are you who you say you are? So for instance, you have to give your username, verify with a fingerprint, and it says, okay, this username, this fingerprint belongs to this user. And the third scenario is authentication, is a one-to-many match, where you can prove who you say you are. So for instance, you have a scenario where you log in to your Windows session with your username and with your password. And in addition, you have to confirm that with your biometric fingerprint to say, okay, this is my second factor. I'm just confirming that this is actually me. Obviously, there are some challenges to introducing biometrics. So first of all, it could be a technical one because, let's face it, I mean, not all devices are equipped with a fingerprint reader by default. Or not all the devices are equipped with a camera. So, sometimes you have to find a workaround to do it. There might be some legal obstacles as well, especially when it comes to privacy laws and how you store biometric data. According to the GDPR, biometric data is seen as highly sensitive data. So you should do every precaution to make sure this data isn't leaked. And this is an interesting info for you. Before you give your biometric data, always ask yourself the question, how my data is being stored and in what form? Because Obviously, all the biometric databases are encrypted, but as you know, databases are being hacked every now and again. So if a company stores your biometric data as an image, as in a template, well, this fingerprint reader is nothing else than a scanner. It just captures the image, and then it's up to the provider to decide what to do with this image. If you store the image as a template, as a picture, if somebody gets through that database, steals this picture, then it's very easy for them to impersonate or copy your fingerprints. Well, you've only got 10, you can't revoke them. Once they're gone, they're gone. So what many organizations do are introducing biometric tokenization. What that actually means is that as you take the fingerprint or the face, you take a few dots from that image, you convert it into a non-convertible hash. So this is a similar kind of use case when you're using Apple Pay. So even though you have to confirm the transaction with your fingerprint, no card data is actually being sent over the internet. What is actually being sent is a hash which cannot be converted back. Another challenge is people. So obviously, very often the mindset is not there. Yes, people don't have the confidence in biometrics. It's a new solution to them, and very often they'll rather say, well, it doesn't work, I just go back to my passwords, rather than actually try and use it. To be honest with you, since I've used Touch ID and iPhone, I wouldn't go back to it, and it's just so easy, it's just so convenient, but it took me a while to get used to it myself as well. Okay, and then obviously privacy, security, we talked about biometric tokenization and how important it actually is to know how your biometric data is being stored. So we're going to talk a bit deeper about face recognition and behavioral, and then we'll jump into a quick demo. So face recognition, 5 things you need to know. What is it actually? How the face recognition technology works? Well, as you capture the face image, there are a few points which are being captured from your face, different distance, different angles. Face geometry is actually a very unique feature that is one in around 10 million. So the likelihood that someone else with a very similar face will be able to spoof it and log into the system is quite unlikely. It's stored as a mathematical representation, as I told you before. It's not stored as an image, but as a hash in a secure database. And then there's a question, okay, is it centralized storage or decentralized storage? Centralized storage meaning there's some kind of a database, encrypted database, where the hashes or the images are stored, versus a decentralized database where basically your face image is stored on a chip, like a TPM chip or an iPhone. And enrollment matters. The way you enroll users and why. You should really pay attention to how you do it, because high-quality enrollment can have a range and impact on future use. You won't have any issues later on. Pay attention to anti-spoofing. Why is it important? Solutions with very good anti-spoofing technologies will have liveness detection. So meaning that if somebody tries to impersonate someone else's face using, a picture or a mask or something else, then the solution is able to detect it, that this is not actually a real face. It doesn't have the characteristics of a real face. Hence, authentication cannot progress. Infrared detection, it's used for very poor lighting conditions. For instance, the camera in the iPhone X relies on infrared, so even if you're trying to log in a very dark room, it's still going to work because it relies on infrared. Face geometry and live action. Well, one of the characteristics of a human brain is that you are able to recognize different faces. So regardless if they smile, if they have their eyes closed, what they do, and the solution should be also sensitive to that. So the bottom line is you should always invest in face recognition that's resilient to a presentation attack where somebody can actually impersonate you. So why does face recognition have a high adoption rate, it's my opinion. So everything's driven by change. So everybody wants to change, everybody wants convenience, everybody wants to look good. To give you an example, obviously, if you ask all of you in this room, who would like to have a perfect body? Well, probably everybody raises their hand and say, well, yes, I would like to. And if I tell you, well, you have to get up at 6 in the morning every day, cook your food to make sure you eat on a regular basis, go to the gym, then probably very few of you will say, well, actually, I'm actually prepared to go through that effort. Otherwise, well, I'm not going to do it. So ease of use drives adoption. The easier a solution is to use, the more users it will have. And it's a normal way of things, really. I mean, that is why fingerprint recognition, since Apple introduced it, and face recognition actually took off, because it was very easy and effortless. Why you should use a very good camera, and why it matters for enrollment? Well, you can probably see the image, and you see many videos on the internet say, oh wait, actually, we caught somebody on CCTV, and this is his image. You look at it like it could be anybody, could be my dad, could be me, could be my brother, because you cannot see a thing through this thing. So it's really important that you use a high-definition camera, a 4K camera, that's equipped with infrared, and ideally, it could be a camera that is looking at somebody from both angles. And also because obviously anti-spoofing techniques rely on a camera. So if you have a good camera, the image is going to be completely different to what you saw before. You can actually recognize who this is. Well, this is not me. It looks similar, but it's not me. Face is sensitive for obviously environmental lighting conditions. So as you can see, in different kind of lights, face looks completely different. So your face recognition technology should be sensible to that as well. Again, comes down to infrared and a good algorithm behind it. Behavioral biometrics, the way I act. So UEBA, user and entity behavioral analytics. It's all about gathering data, how the user behaves, and look for abnormalities. It's a little bit like, I can only compare it to your gut feel. You see somebody for the first time, you've never met him, you don't know him, you look at him, you think, I don't like this guy, I don't know. I'm going to give him a benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to watch very carefully what he does, and I'm not going to trust him. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but this is your kind of gut feel. You evaluate the risk as it develops. So there's different types of behavioral biometrics, either contextual authentication. It's based on your movements, let's say what IP address you are logging in from, what distance have you traveled in a set period of time, what time do you normally log in, is that your usual working pattern, what's the device you are using, against a risk-based authentication where you look at several different factors, and based on that you apply policies that are applicable. And also continuous authentication. This is exactly what I was talking about in the Google example, where you gather users' data and you don't see the login authentication process as either 0, as in not logged in, or 1, logged in. But you've got a scale from 1 to 100, and you constantly evaluate. If the scale drops, let's say to 80, 70%, you may have to use it. Oh, by the way, I don't have the certainty that this is actually still you working on that machine. Can you please re-authenticate and give me another factor just to confirm that this is actually you? Keystroke Biometrics, so using some intelligent artificial technology, you can actually track user behavior. Said, okay, what is his typing pattern? How long does he press the key? What's the sequence between the key? And based on that, actually determine with 99% certainty that the user is actually the user and not somebody else. It's very hard to impersonate this. So building in biometrics in a risk-based approach. So see how many data sources you can have. So you can have geolocation, health certificates, GPS location, what time is the user accessing actually the network, is this his usual time, unusual time, travel itineraries, someone's traveling to Germany, but he's actually logging in from China, well, could be using a VPN, but not necessarily, so let's weigh out, username, password, one-time passwords, is this a software token, hardware token, or biometrics, again, fingerprint, retina, handwriting recognition, or his usual behavior. So, weighing out all those kind of factors, you can provide a very, very comprehensive approach to authentication. So quickly, how we do it at Crossmatch Digital Persona. So if you look at the left-hand side, you've got traditional authentication, which again, relies on a user-generated password, which could be weak, could be compromised, could be shared with somebody else. So secure access is always dependent on human compliance. The burden is always on the end user, and best protection is highly disruptive for the user. So if you make the password policy more complex, then the users will always find a way to go around it. And also you have the issue that the coverage is incomplete, so you cannot protect all the users, all the applications, because you've got some legacy application, you've got some web application, you've got some Windows logon, so it's very inconsistent. Whereas in a modern authentication approach, you've got the broadest choice of authentication factors, and you eliminate the dependency on the end user. Take the burden off the end user, put the security policies high, but actually make the user experience frictionless. Just like using your phone, put your fingerprint in, bang. You just don't have to put complex password. It's a single sign-on mode, one access for everybody, and optimal security because you can cover every app, every user, every time, everywhere, regardless of the context. So how we do it at Crossmatch. So we combine the traditional factors in multifactor. So what it could be password, PIN, recovery questions with who you are, fingerprint, face, and what you have. Could be smart card, contactless card, proximity cards. Could be a Bluetooth device, Apple Watch FIDO token with the context, as in how you behave, what you do, what's your keystroke, how do you swipe, what's your usual GPS location, IP address, geofencing. Do you work in certain hours? And if you log in outside of those hours, we need to know why in a way. Well, you may want to re-authenticate if the risk is too high for you just basically to be let into the system at an unusual pattern. And also geovelocity. If you work from Utrecht and a half an hour later, well, you are in Amsterdam, well, it's quite possible. But if you're 15 minutes later, you're in Amsterdam, it's quite unlikely. So we may want to ask you to authenticate. Okay then guys, so enough of the architecture. I'll show you a quick demo before we finish. How much time do we have? We have about 10 minutes. Okay, that's fine. That should be enough. Okay, so let me lock my PC. So normally the options you have to unlock it is a password. Let's say what happens if you forget your password, well, you have to call the help desk, and there's no other way around it. So in this scenario, the system has weighed out those are the factors that can be made available. The administrator has determined those factors can be made available. So I can, instead of a password, I can use a FIDO key. I can use a PIN. I can use a fingerprint. I can pair my phone with the laptop and use it as a factor as well. If the phone's there, I can log in. If I take my phone away, I get locked out. Same with a proximity card or a smart card. If the card is there, it means that the user is there as well. If the card's taken away, well, you may want to lock the PC. I can use a one-time password in form of a push OTP or SMS, or I can use a standard password. So in this scenario, let's see what happens. So I'll put my fingerprint on the reader, and I didn't get logged in because I'm not in a corporate network. So I'm not using a VPN, not in a corporate network. I'm in an open network, so the risk factor has been set higher, which means that I still have to use another factor to log in. For me, the most convenient way is the PIN. I just type my PIN in, and I'm logged in. Same thing, I could use a push OTP to get access, which gets sent directly to my phone. I can see here, get a notification, log in, approve, and I get logged in. So how does it change in context? I'll give you an example of using the solution with a legacy app. Legacy app meaning it's my Barracuda VPN application. So the solution has been, the application has been enrolled, which means that you can see this icon popping up here. So the password manager takes care of the password in the background. So as soon as I put my fingerprint in, it's going to replay the password and log me in. To be honest with you, I don't even know what my password is for VPN. I don't know. I don't have to know. I never use it, and I get logged in. As soon as I lock my PC, again, same scenario. Lock my PC. I only have 4 options here because again, there's different policy if I'm on the network. Put my fingerprint in, and I get logged in automatically. There's no dual-factor authentication. So you can set up it in many ways. So you can say if somebody logs in for the first time of the day, you need to use 2 or 3 factors. If it's a second login, 1 is enough. And again, there's many, many different scenarios that you can build in here. So this was an example of Windows Logon. That's an example of a legacy application requiring username and password. What about web applications? I'll give you an example of Office 365 to start with. As you could see, I've put the normal office.com website, and as soon as I do that, actually that shouldn't work like this. I know it's not a demo environment, it's a live environment. Normally, I would see a Microsoft login page, and as soon as I put my email address, Microsoft knows that for this authentication, the cross-match tenant is responsible. So he would redirect me to this web page, which again, depending on the setup, I can have the same kind of factors, so password, fingerprint cards, SMS, or a push OTP. So again, the easiest way for me is to do it via the fingerprint. So I like using my PC the same way I use my phone, and I'm in. Another example, using single sign-on this time is trying to get into Salesforce. As soon as I do that, so solution knows exactly, okay, cross-match single sign-on has been installed here. And I've already authenticated to Office 365, which is my credential provider, and I'm in Salesforce. So the integration can be done either via SAML tokens or Radius. Another example is an integration with an SDK. So imagine you are a bank and you want to allow your customers to log into your banking portal. This is all this time. This is a demo environment. I click on sign in, and here this is going to be an example of identification. As soon as I put my fingerprints in, it's going to recognize that they belong to me, and either based on the risk I get logged in, or asked for a second factor. Same logic you can apply to passwords, for instance. So you rely on fingerprint and a password. Let's say you put the password in, and the password is correct, but you've done it in a manner that's not kind of usual to you. Maybe it's a Monday, you had an eventful weekend, whatever. You can also lock not lock the user out, but actually prevent authentication, ask the user to re-authenticate using another factor because the typing pattern was not correct for this user. I know this was a very short demo, and we've got, I think, 4 minutes left, guys. So are there any questions from your end that I could answer? No? Okay, so thank you very much. So enjoy the rest of AppManagEvent. If you want to find out more, join me at my CrossPitch booth, and look forward to seeing you later on. Thank you. Thank you.